Hi, this is Krista at the Secret Yarnery.
Today we are making these super cute, easy, and fast crochet flowers. These flowers are a super great stash buster. You just need 2 different colors of yarn, a tiny little bit for your center, and a small amount to make the rest of your flower. You can attach them to your hats or a headband, or even just turn it into a barrette all on its own. They would look great on slippers or even on your favorite whip bag. If English isn't your first language, you can click this gear on the video and scroll through to find your preferred dialect. To make these super easy crochet flowers, you are going to need 2 different colors of yarn, one for the center and one for your flower. I'm using 4-weight worsted acrylic yarn and a 5mm crochet hook. That is a 10-ply if you are in Australia. And you will also need a pair of scissors. We don't have to sew in our tails for this pattern. We're just going to tidy them up along the back, and we can also use our tails to attach our flower. So you can leave a longer tail when you get started, so you could use that tail to attach your flower wherever you want it to be. And if you want to follow along with written pattern, all of my patterns are available on my website, secretyarnery.com, and you don't have to worry about being able to read a pattern. All of my patterns are written in plain English, just like I was sitting there right beside you. To start the center of your flower, grab your center color. I'm going to be starting with a magic ring, but you can also do a chain 3 ring if you leave a long enough tail, because we're going to have to sew that chain 3 ring shut. So lay the tail over your non-dominant hand and just pinch it down on your ring finger, just like that. Wrap it around your 2 fingers, making an X. And then wrap it around all 3 fingers, just holding it underneath your thumb as well. Turn your hand over so you have a short strand and a long strand. Grab your crochet hook. I'm using a 5mm for my flower. Slide it underneath the short strand and grabbing the long strand, bring it under and point the hook towards yourself, turning that hook and releasing your thumb a little bit so that long strand can slide. Grabbing the long strand, releasing it with your thumb. Now you can go ahead and just pinch that loop on your hook and bring the working yarn through. So there is your magic ring. And chain 2. 1 and 2. So this is going to count as our first double crochet. And now you're going to make 7 double crochets into that ring. So there is 1, 2, and make sure you're going over your tail. 3, and 7. Our chain counts as our first stitch, so that counts as 8 double crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now, just shrink down your magic ring. We don't have to snug it down really tight right now. And now we are going to slip stitch to join. So just the top of that chain 2 right there, and we want 2 strands of that stitch on the top of our hook. So just pop your hook in, 2 strands on the top of your hook, bring it through, turn, and bring it through. So a slip stitch to join, and chain 1. Cut your yarn, pull your hook up and your yarn through, and snug that down to secure. And that is the center of our flower. I suggest making a whole bunch of these centers first, and then you could just grab one and make your flower. And that'll just help you get all your flowers done really quick. So now we're ready to start our petals. Using the same crochet hook, we're just going to work into the front of our stitches, so the pretty stitches inside our dish, and we're just going to be working in between those stitches. So just into that space. We're not working into the stitches, we're just working in between the space. So just pop your hook in, loop of your petal color or your flower color on your hook, bring it through, slip stitch with both strands to join, dropping your tail, and chaining 2. 1 and 2. Into that very same space, 4 double crochets into the same space between those stitches. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Pull your hook up to make a bigger loop. Take your hook out. Now we want to go into the top of that chain. We're going to make a popcorn. So go into the top of that chain 2 we made right there. Top of the chain, 2 strands on your hook, on the top of your hook. Loop back on your hook. Just hold it on with your finger. Shrink that down and bring your hook through, just like that, to form your popcorn, and chain 2. 1 and 2. Now find the next space between those next stitches right there and wrap your yarn and make 5 double crochets into the next space. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Pull your hook up to make a bigger loop. Take your hook out. Now we are going to be looking for that very first double crochet we made right there. So pop your hook in, 2 strands of that stitch on your hook, loop back on your hook, and bring it through that stitch and chain 2. 1 and 2. So we're going to do that little popcorn in between each stitch all the way around. So into the next space, 5 double crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Pull your hook up and into that very first stitch we made. Right there, slide that hook in, just into that very first stitch. The first double crochet, just into that stitch, loop back on your hook, shrink it down, bring it through that stitch, and chain 2. 1 and 2. So now you can pause the video and keep working around, doing a 5 double crochet popcorn in between each stitch, all the way around, and I'll meet you when we get back to where we started. You will have a total of 8 popcorns. There we go, we have our 8 popcorns all the way around, and I've done my chain 2. Now into this space right after our first popcorn, we're just going to pop our hook right into that space and slip stitch. Just like that. So that finishes our first round of petals. Now we are going to start our second round of petals. So chain 2, 1 and 2, and into the space, we're going to work into the spaces all the way around, the space in between our popcorns. So into this very first space, 3 double crochets. 1, 2, 3, chain 2, and slip stitch into that same space. Slip stitch. So that finishes our first petal. Now we're going to slip stitch into the next space after the next popcorn. So slip stitch into the next space, chain 2, 1 and 2, 3 double crochets into that same space, 1, 2, 3, and chain 2, 1 and 2, and we're going to slip stitch into that same space to finish. So slip stitch into that space and slip stitch into the next space, just like that. chain 2, 1 and 2, 3 double crochets into the space, 1, 2, and 3, chain 2, 1 and 2, and slip stitch into that same space. Just like that. So now you can pause the video and keep working along, starting your petal with a slip stitch into the next space, a chain 2, 3 double crochets, a chain 2, and slip stitch into that same space to finish. So pause the video and keep working around. A new petal in between each popcorn of the row below. You'll have a total of 8, and I will meet you when you get back into your last space. When you get back around to where we started, I've done my chain 2, 3 double crochets, and chain 2. We're going to slip stitch into that same space to finish, just like that, and chain 1. Cut your yarn, leaving a long enough tail. Pull your hook up and your yarn through, and snug that down to secure. Now you are welcome to sew in your tails if you like, but I'm going to show you how I do mine. And now we're going to slip stitch over into that first space where we began our first petal. One little slip stitch and chain 1. And now cut your tail, but leave a long enough tail so we can use this yarn to attach our flower onto wherever we're putting our flower. Pull your hook up and your yarn through and snug that down to secure. Now go ahead and knot your tail, so just cinch in that magic ring in the middle. Cinch that closed nice and snug. If you're doing a chain 3 ring, go ahead, thread your needle and cinch your ring shut with your needle and your yarn. But if you did a magic ring, you could just pull that tail. And now we're going to knot our tails. And if you are putting this on something that's super, super, super washable, it's going to be in the wash every week, you can go ahead, knot your tails, and also sew them in with a needle after you have tied them, or you could just sew them in if you feel like it. And I'm just doing 3 knots on each knot and leaving a little bit of a tail. Not going to see it underneath your flower. And I'm going to do the same thing for our outer petal, or outer tails, but I'm going to bring the tail from the outside towards the center. I want it to be close to, I don't want to have a knot on the edge of my petals. I'm just going to knot it nice and snug on the inside. Or closer to the center. Nice and firmly, and I'm going to do it 3 times just to be sure. And this is if you're using acrylic yarn. If you're using a fancier yarn or a cotton or a slippery yarn, be careful that you don't snap your yarn. And then you can snip off the short tail and then use this long tail for attaching your flower onto wherever you want it to be. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial as much as I did. I'm waiting for you in that video right there, and stay hooked.